Hello, it's Dr. Moore. So today, the particular lesson I'm going to talk about is called Assessing Your Belief in Your Ability to Excel. And so as a student of science, your mindset, your attitude and belief about your ability to excel is everything. You have to protect it with everything. Because as you're beginning to solve a problem, if you believe you're not smart enough, it's either going to close up your mind to a solution exists or open it up because you're smart enough, a solution exists. So you have to protect that mindset. And as I was going through as a student of science, I went through different stages of confidence and belief in my ability. And so what I did is I put that into a particular life cycle of a monarch butterfly, just so we have some labels, so we can talk about these specific stages. So the first stage is the egg stage. At the egg stage, you're insecure, right? You don't know if you're smart enough to do well in your classes. You are trying to memorize as much as you can and try to replicate exactly what the instructor told you to do to prove to yourself you can get the problems right. But then at some point you move to the larva stage. At the larva stage, you're starting to get some problems right, but you still believe you're like one class away from dropping out of your major or one exam away from dropping out of your major. And then you then move to the pupa stage. At the pupa stage, you're starting to see some successes in your classes, right? You're starting to gain some confidence, but you still may be afraid of the unknown. And then you move to what I call the adult stage. At the adult stage, you get excited about problems because you know it gives you an opportunity to grow, to expand your mind. You're able to ask good questions. You're able to find the solutions to the questions that you have. You're able to then have a more of a complete picture of what you're doing, and you can own it. So the key question for you is, have you got to the adult stage in other areas of your life? Maybe it was playing a sport, maybe it's doing an extracurricular activity. And if you have, how can you then identify what steps you took to get to that adult stage? And then how can you potentially replicate that as a student of science in an academic setting, right? And sometimes we do regress and we get our feelings hurt because we thought we were going to do better than we were on a particular exam. But it's then, how do you then identify the reasons why and close up those gaps and then push and get to that next stage in your evolution as a student of science? So all I want you guys to do is win. Win, 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 no matter what. Thank you. All right, so this workshop is going to be on assessing your belief in your ability to excel in STEM. Your belief is everything. It is everything. It is everything. So if you are on the workbook, it should be page 11. But let me have someone go ahead and tell me what you believe that illustration is at the very front of the lesson. What do you think that illustration is? What are you thinking, Jasmine?
It's about pushing yourself.
It's about pushing yourself? Okay. Like how? Why?
Because, well, I think that it is heavy things that can go 25 miles per hour, but his body can go 100. So maybe limiting himself if he thinks that he can't do it.
Okay, so in this illustration, this athlete believes he can only do 25 miles per hour, but he got an engine on there that can do a lot more, right? So basically, your belief in your ability to excel in STEM is everything. As a matter of fact, it's everything in life. Your belief in my opinion, in life in regards to when you start a new task, when you start a new class, when you start a new job, when you start a new project, right? If your belief is, this is just way too hard, then it's going to shut down your intellect, right? Your intellect's going to be like, it's just way too hard. But if you believe you're capable, then it opens up your intellect and it allows it to receive the solution or a pathway forward, right? Your emotional belief has that kind of control and or connection to your body and your mind. And so, who knows what type of processors you have in your mind? Who knows what abilities or gifts you have stored in your DNA? But it's your job to identify that and then develop it and bring it out, right? Because you may have a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a Koenigsegg that can do 250, but you doing 125 and you think you're winning, but we know in those cars, they don't even open up till they get to 150. And a lot of times too, we compare ourselves to other people. You're doing 125 and getting an A in a class with a little bit or less effort. But if you actually really locked in and studied and maybe did more than what the teacher expected of you, then you would be that much further because you have that ability, right? So it's just something to think about. Are your beliefs, are your ideas of yourself limiting you? And if so, then how do we remove those, right? How do we neutralize those? How do we erase those so then you guys can become all of who you guys are capable of being? Any thoughts, any comments as we kind of move into this lesson around that idea of belief? All right, I got a choir group today. We won't be quiet for that long. All right, so let me have you go ahead and read that quote right underneath the title.
Mental confidence, the ability to learn new information, utilize it, and be self-assured that one has applied that information correctly. This requires developing a deep understanding of how one thinks and processes information, creating a check and balance system within your mind that can constantly test information as you learn it.
All right, so what do you think I'm trying to say in that long paragraph quote?
That mental confidence is important.
Mental confidence is everything to me. You have to be confident in yourself, right? Because if you're not, then you're out there in fear of being exposed or being caught because you feel like an imposter. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're not confident in your ability to come up with an answer or solution and then trust it, that's a hard way to live. That's a hard way to live. So, but to gain that mental confidence, I'm also saying you have to have a process within yourself to rigorously test what you believe you know. And I know none of you guys, but I've definitely met folks and I had friends that had a grandiose idea of what they were capable of and a grandiose idea of what they believed they knew, and they were nowhere near that. So their results never really matched what they thought that they were going to get on an exam. And I'll be honest with you, at some point along my journey, my academic journey, there were times where I thought I was going into an exam about to kill it and came out with my feelings hurt and was like, damn. Right? I was like, wow. Right? And that's okay, right? Because in that moment, they were giving you an opportunity, that professor, that test, whatever, gave you an opportunity or was giving you an opportunity to correct some things that like maybe just aren't where you think they're at. And that's why I really believe that, one's integrity as a student of science is directly proportional to how successful you are. Right? When I say self-integrity, how honest you are with yourself. So how honest you are with yourself is directly proportional, because if you're honest with yourself and you believe you know something, then you'll deliver when it's time for you to take that exam. Right? But if you're not honest with yourself and you think that you're at a stage where you really are, you think you're at a stage that you're not, then you'll have that weakness will be exposed. And that's why as a student of science, no matter what you believe you think you know, it's theoretical until you actually get tested with the problems. And even if you got that problem right, because you got a photographic memory or a good pattern recognition game, with plugging and chugging, make sure you threw the formula in there and all the units matched up. I mean, I know none of y'all do that all the time, but some people just do that, right? What formula should I be using? It's chemistry. Okay, PV equals nRT. Let me make sure my units line up and crossing all them out. It should be this. Well, no, it shouldn't. If you can't explain to me every single step along the way and why each step is critical to getting that right answer, then you still can be easily tricked or manipulated with the word problem that doesn't look similar to what you've seen before. Right, Ronan? Talk to me, y'all. What y'all thinking? I know the people in Zoom land right now maybe don't have that same voice, but if there's any questions you guys have, you may have to put it in the chat, and I will definitely try to answer those. All right, so how are we going to promote this STEM attitude? So this very first paragraph, for many it is intuitive that our mindset, either positive or negative, can have a direct impact on our desired outcome. We know that the mind has some kind of impact, right? And research studies also have validated this intuition by indicating that a student's self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to achieve something, is the biggest factor that would determine success for a student pursuing a degree in STEM. I've even done research on this. I've done research where I've taken the pre-survey that you guys probably should have taken by now, with those 6 factors that I look at, and I've given it to about 200 plus students taking general chemistry here at City College. And that was years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. So 6 factors, self-efficacy was one of them, and I gave them a $10 gift card to take the survey, and then I could look at their profile. And then at the end of the semester, I looked at their grades in the course. Who got A's, B's, C's, whoever got lower ones. And guess what? Self-efficacy had a 12.8% effect on students' grades. A whole letter grade. So again, when I tell you that you have to be able to protect your mindset and attitude and your belief in your ability with everything, it has a huge effect on your grade. I'm not going to take this course because I heard that this professor is hard or challenging, so I'm going to do this instead, right? You were already saying that the course is hard before you even start the course because someone you don't really know that well said X, Y, or Z. I heard organic chemistry is really, all the things I heard, right? So, in my mind, when I was going through, anybody who told me a class was hard, I'm like, I'm really about to get an A in this class. I'm like, you said what? Okay, that's you. That ain't got nothing to do with me. That's you. I'm my own island. All right, so this mental attitude is huge. And we have have to figure out how to nurture it, how to foster a positive one, how to foster one that we believe that we are capable no matter what's in front of us, and how to expand it each day. So as we flip to the next page, one of the things that I try to do when I'm better trying to understand not only the world around me, and I'm saying more from a physical and a life science standpoint when I was in school, but also just people, right? I'm really interested in understanding people. I'm curious about people who are eclectic or just eccentric or different. If I can't figure them out quickly, then I'm focused on them a little more than someone who's easy to figure out. But as I'm also trying to figure out somebody, I'm trying to figure out how to put them into categories and or into some kind of framework of things that I believe I understand. And so in this case, this attitude, developing a positive STEM attitude, I connected to a life cycle of a monarch butterfly. So in this cycle, you can take a look at the picture, the egg stage. This is when the student tries to convince his or herself that they are smart enough to understand the information being taught. I can connect to that stage because at some point, when I first started, I was trying to convince myself. I was like, damn, can I do this? I don't know, maybe. They may try to memorize as much information as possible as a way to prove to themselves they understand the key concepts. Right? And they only feel comfortable doing a problem the one way that the professor or instructor taught them. I got to do it this way because this is the way I know I can get to the right answer. They may feel shy or insecure about raising their hand in class, asking questions. They may even be intimidated by people who are smarter than them and don't want to study with them. Right? Like, you know what? This person always gets the right answers. I ain't trying to mess with you. I'm going to go study with somebody that's maybe at a lower level than me so I can feel better about myself. I'm not saying none of y'all, but I'm saying other people. They do that sometimes, right? But that's at the very egg stage. But at the larva stage, you started to experience some successes in your class. But still, you maybe don't completely believe that you have the ability to excel. You've seen some successes, but you also may be thinking, am I one exam away from dropping out of this major? Right? Like, I'm doing all right right now, but when I get to that third semester of physics, or if I get to that linear algebra class and differential equations, when I get to OChem, I don't know. Right? Maybe. But that's the larva stage, right? The pupa stage. The student believes they are smart enough to be successful in their chosen path and major, but still maybe has a little bit of awareness of the unknown. But you still believe that you can be successful. A little bit timid, right? The student has struggled with difficult concepts before and have seen some successes and failures. And I'm going to say beginning to own your successes, right? And own your ability to learn from your failures. So, but they still may not have confidence in their ability to consistently get the correct answer. But you're starting to ask good questions, but don't know always a way or pathway to find the solutions to it. Right? That's that third, if you want to call it teenager stage. Right? The egg stage, the baby stage, the pupa stage. You're a little taller running around, still trying to get potty trained and everything like that. But at least like now you're a teenager trying to drive, right? And at that adult stage, you get excited about difficult problems because whatever that problem is, it gives you an opportunity to grow. You start to dig in like, whatever you got, throw it at me. Let's go. You have mental confidence that we talked about earlier in that very first paragraph that we read. And you look for ways to apply the information that you believe that you know to create. right? At the end of the day, whatever we're learning in our classes, whatever grade you got on an exam, in my mind, is meaningless if you don't have the ability to use that to do something with someday. Like, science is not a Jeopardy game, right? Like, it's not a journey of, let me just collect facts, right? Let me just collect a whole bunch of facts and then go on Jeopardy and just spew them out because I'm trying to win some money. No, you're learning how to understand the physical universe, the life, sciences. You're trying to learn how to understand, material universe in regards to technology or whatnot, so you can actually apply it to create something or develop something or solve problems that affect the world, right? That's the ultimate goal. Not just to get an A in class and then afterwards the information skeets out of you, right? Like, no. So, that adult stage, you've developed a way to form a check and balance system in your mind. So when you do have maybe thinking that has errors in it, how to correct that. And what we're going to focus on over the next course of this time together is how do we facilitate that within ourselves to getting to that adult stage. All right, so question 1. Carl, go ahead and read that for us real quick.
Question 1. Using the esteem mental attitude scale, what stage are you in for each of your math and science courses?
All right, so think about that. Spend 7, 10, 15 seconds thinking about it. In the courses that I'm taking now, some of you may be taking 2 or 3 different math or science courses. What stage am I in my math course? What stage am I potentially in my science or science courses? But just kind of evaluate yourself. And I'm calling on folks, so y'all need to go ahead and think about that real deeply. Especially when I ain't got nothing to do. Okay, I see someone's at the larger stage. Nice. All right, Adam, what you thinking?
For calculus 2, I said I'm larval.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Because it's like one exam is like 50% of my grade. So if I feel like if I do bad on it, then maybe I feel like dropping out of my major.
Okay. All right. Is that the only class you're taking right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for being honest, sharing. How about some folks over here in this range? Where are you at, Ronan?
I feel like I'm in the FIBA stage for most of my classes.
Nice. Okay.
Pretty much all of them.
Okay. All right. That's a good place to be. So, this first question is just how do we try to assess ourselves and acknowledge, maybe using some of these words here with these different stages, where we believe that we're at. But question 2 is, this stage may not be for the whole entirety of the course, right? Because a new concept, you may go from pupa or dough back to egg like, damn. I don't know if I'm going to learn this new concept because it seems like it's pretty complicated. So are there instances where you believe that stage just may change even based on the, you moving through a course? What are you thinking?
Number 2. When I took AP Calc in high school, and I got to the 6th unit, I was in the X stage, and that kind of like derailed me completely. Just because I felt like I needed to memorize everything, and once I didn't grasp that, everything went like downhill.
Okay. So, you know, that X stage can definitely be a stage where there's a lot more, you may be a lot more fragile. And, you know, you just got to make sure that if you're in that stage that you can do as much as you can and get as much support you can to try to move on to that next stage. So, question 3, have you moved from the egg stage to the larva stage in any of your math and science courses? And if so, how did you reach that next stage, the larva stage? So think about that. We're all sometimes, the new things that we're doing start off in the egg stage. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're trying something new, and you may have no idea how successful you may or may not be. But at some point, the goal is to move to that next stage. So think about that. Think about beginning of the semester potentially. Think about if you've been here for a semester or 2 or 3. But think about a class, a math or science course where you've maybe started off in the egg stage and you found a way to push yourself to that next stage. What things did you do to get yourself to that next stage? What are you thinking?
I don't know, maybe just like a few, success in some homework or just practice test. And I seem to have maybe like a great grade in one of my practice exam in the calculus, and then just make me feel, oh, I think I can do that. So yeah, that's all.
Okay, do homework and practice exams? Okay. What else? What else can we do?
Max has disappeared, but he said do the questions at the end of the chapter, right, Max? Is that what you said?
Okay, do chapter problems. But it's not enough in my mind to do the problems. Of course, doing the problems is the first step, but it's the quality of your thinking, right? Like, if you did all the problems and all you did was memorize exactly what the teacher told you to do, right, and just use your pattern recognition game to look for something similar so you can regurgitate it, that's not knowing that information at a deep level to be able to create with it, right? So it's being able to potentially teach somebody else what you believe you know, maybe. Maybe you could get some confidence because you come to me and I'm like, oh, okay, let me show you how I did that. No?
Our bio teacher was telling us yesterday, if we do study groups with each other, we can make multiple choice questions for each other and give that to each other to study.
Okay. Well, I'll say when that teaching others is a very powerful way for you to find out what you know and what you don't know. And I'll just say, teaching me, I will definitely poke holes in everything you tell me to figure out, is it actually right or not? Right? If you're telling me something, you're trying to teach me something, I'm going to ask you questions along the way and be like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And you're like, oh, I never thought about that. I'm like, so that's going to teach you what you believe you know or don't know because you're teaching someone else and they're asking you questions actively, right? What about creating analogies or metaphors? Right? Being able to take a concept and personalizing it. Maybe, maybe not. So when I say personalize it, I mean, and I think I mentioned this in the last workshop, when someone is teaching me something, I have to be able to take that concept and make it mine. So when someone's learning a new word, say you're learning a word from Webster's dictionary, and whatever that word is, if you memorize what that word is in Webster's dictionary, then you only know that word in that one meaning that you memorized in Webster's dictionary. But if you take that word and you form your own sentence with that word, I think this word means this. So you form your own sentence, then you've created new connections in your mind that are personal to you with that concept. That's winning. And in my opinion, that's what you need to do with every single concept that you learn. So right when someone's teaching me something, I will try to go back in my mind to something that I think is similar to that I believe I understand. And then I will ask, oh, so is that similar to this? Right? I'll look for that connection and ask, is it similar to that? And that's my way of validating if what I believe I understand is what I understand. And then that gives me a little bit more confidence that I actually really know what I think that I know. So I'm also going to say create analogies and metaphors. So how do we then move on from the larva stage to the pupa stage? Think about it, y'all. We got to get to the highest stage that we can with what we believe we know and what we believe we can do with what we believe we understand and know. So we still are pushing ourselves, right? Because still at that larva stage, we don't have that much confidence. You know, we still kind of, really think that we may be one exam away from dropping out of the course. But we want to try to get to the stage where we feel really confident with what we know. And I think that some of these things can begin to get us there. But what else can we do that can allow us to gain more confidence with these concepts that we're learning? Are you guys kind of feeling that this is kind of more difficult to think about? Is it kind of more abstract a little bit than some other things that we've kind of covered before? Yay, nay? What are you thinking, Ron? Because you mentioned that you're at the pupa stage, so how'd you get there?
I feel like sometimes maybe applying that knowledge a little more hands-on, or that could be one way. But sometimes you're putting yourself in a position to be in that stage, and you have to trust in yourself that you'll get there, but you don't always see results right away.
Okay. I like applying the knowledge of the hands-on activities. And then you mentioned trusting in yourself. Do you feel like there's something that clicked for you to kind of now say, now I trust myself a little more?
Kind of you start to, when you start to do good on something, you think back to the times that you did good, remember that you can do that again. You want to get back to that place.
Okay, when successful. So, what I'll say, and this may be somewhat controversial, but I believe there's some strands of truth here. And what I'll also state is I'm generalizing right now, right? So typically I don't generalize. You know, my background in science, I've just learned and trained myself because there's always nuances and there's always things, but sometimes I just generalize and I'm stating that I'm generalizing. So there is clearly a difference of how men or boys and women and girls are socialized in our society. I'm hoping that at some point those things aren't as drastic as maybe when I was growing up, but there's a difference, right? And the thing about boys is that you could be a boy, say you're 6th grade or 7th grade, you're trying to find out what you're really good at, and the things that you're good at because you're better than the other boys with, either in being sports or academics or whatever it is, you kind of lock it in a way where you're like, I have value because I'm good at this one thing. Because I'm good at this one thing, I have value. Maybe I have enough value where I can make a lot of money someday or convince some girl that I like that I'm cool because I have this one thing that I have value in. But sometimes with girls when they're growing up, what I've come to realize is they can be good at like 5 things. And they focus on the one thing they're not good at. I'm like, but you're good at like 5 things. And it's one of those things that even when I first met my partner, my wife, like she's really successful academically and professionally. But I'll just start with academically. She went to a really good school. She has a bachelor's degree in mathematics. She went to a good school like Johns Hopkins, got a master's degree in mathematics and engineering. She went to Berkeley, got a PhD in, like she's someone that you could just say that like on multiple levels. And I'm like, why are you focusing on this one thing that like you're not good at? Like if I was a guy, I'm like, I am the shit. I mean, like if a guy had all the things that you have going for you, he wouldn't be sitting here focusing on this one thing or 2 things that you think you're not good at. He'd be like, you know what? My name is King Tut. I used to rule Egypt someday, and like, you know, what's up? And so it's one of those things where we have to learn how to lock in our successes and believe not that we got there by luck, because you have abilities. Because you worked hard and you were able to learn and master things. Everybody has to do that. But that's how you get confidence. And I'm not saying arrogance. You know, I'm not saying someone saying I'm better than somebody else. It's never about somebody else. It's always about you. But when you are successful at something, you should go back and understand, what was my approach to be successful, right? What steps did I take? What were my actions? You need to be conscious of that. Because if you're not conscious of your approach and your steps, then you may default by saying it happened by luck. But if you know exactly what you did and why it worked, then hopefully that gives you a little bit more confidence too, right? Because if you see something similar, by knowing these things, maybe you can apply 85 or 90% of that approach and steps to this new thing and just refine it a little bit. But even if you failed at something or didn't see the results that you believed that you wanted, then you can go back, if you understand your approach and steps, and modify them. And adapt them so you can actually get to that W category, get to that win, right? So, if for whatever reason you may not always lock in and trust when you have successes in life, then it's finding ways to, keep a success journal to document, to find ways for you to kind of remind yourself of who you are. So you can gain that trust in yourself at the highest level. Because again, we talked about attitude. We talked about how your attitude when you start something is going to dictate if it opens up your mind to fully be able to access all of what it's capable of, or shut that mug down because it's just way too hard. Talk to me, y'all. What y'all thinking? Because I said a whole lot. You got some comments there, Wynn?
Some of the comments from the virtual world real quick. Stas was mentioning he attends study groups, but he starts working and preparing for final exams early. And Anna said she has to trust her wins from her understanding of her inner ability, not just by luck. She said that before you actually started going into that. And studying and recognizing the concepts outside of the academic settings, how they apply to real life.
Okay. Connect knowledge to personal life. What was that middle one that you mentioned?
Trusting that we got our wins from our understanding and ability and not just by luck.
Okay. Not by luck. So, part of what I was mentioning to you in regards to like learning something and then trying to personalize it. I remember when I was taking general chemistry at the community college. It was a long time ago. This is probably way before you guys were born, in the early 90s. But when I learned about like equilibrium, and I learned about how water, when it's in the solid state, is going back and forth between the solid state and the water state. Like when you have some water and you put some ice cubes in it. I just remember like looking at the water and the ice cubes, and then at some point, it's going to find an equilibrium where whatever coldness it is, the rate that it goes from a solid to the water and the water back to the solid, it finds that perfect rate, and then it can stay there for a long time. Right? I remember like thinking about that, and I remember I went back and I was talking to my dad, because my dad's old school. He passed away at this point, but he grew up in Mississippi in the South, and they like to drink a lot of sweet tea. You know what I'm saying? But the way they get it right is they put the sweet tea and they put some ice in there, and they kind of swig it around like this. So the ice can kind of melt a little bit, but get to that little state, right? It gets to that perfect temperature of coldness. And I was telling him about equilibrium, and I was breaking it down to him. And that was one way for me to take the things that I was learning in school that can sometimes seem abstract, and then talk to somebody who doesn't know that information, but break it down to them in a way, like a third grader, and have them understand it. And that's another way of beginning to personalize information so you can own it. Like one thing that was really important to me when I was studying science, in particular in graduate school, because, when I was in grad school a long time ago, there just wasn't a lot of people who looked like me in grad school. And it was important for me to do science, or to study some science that I could talk to the people in my community about. Like I didn't want to do research on flies or worms or none of that. I'm like, no, I want to do human genetics. Like it was important to me. I can do some work on some mice because I know it's one jump to like humans, and we can kind of go there with the genes and stuff. But I had to do stuff in humans. So I chose genetic infertility. So I could talk to my friends and be like, do you know that in this room of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people, that 1.5 of the folks in this room are infertile and don't know it? Oh yeah, on average. And so you spend 45, 50% of your life trying not to get somebody pregnant, and then when you actually get married and have a partner and want to get somebody pregnant, you realize that you can't. So I'm looking at better understanding what genes cause infertility and how do we then find pathways to correct them. But that was my way of connecting what I was doing to the average person. They're like, damn, like finding ways to personalize that information. All right, anybody have any last thoughts or comments before we move on? All right, so have you ever got to the adult stage? And with the adult stage, I'll just say, have you ever got to the adult stage with anything that you've done in life? Maybe it was playing sports, or maybe it was playing an instrument, or maybe it was doing an extracurricular activity. But I want you to think, have you ever got to that level of confidence and mastery? And if so, how did you do it? What are folks thinking? How about you?
I guess art.
In art?
When I first started digital art, it was kind of hard for me to, I guess, get used to it because I was so used to doing traditional art, just like paper and different mediums and everything like that. But that was also in sport, and then I switched to digital, and I kind of just taught myself with more practice. I feel like I'm pretty good, and I can make a good art piece without looking at tutorials.
So what do you think allowed you to get to that adult stage?
Just keep practicing.
Okay, keep putting in the work.
Practicing and experimenting different things.
All right, and I like that you also said experimenting. So I was trying new stuff. Anybody else have anything you want to? Go
I
ahead.
think computer science.
Okay. And then what do you believe allowed you to get to that stage in computer science or programming?
I think I saw I was developing my own games, kind of small games just for myself. And I faced with a lot of problems that I should solve. And I just learned a lot of concepts and learned from my mistakes.
Okay. What do you think inside of yourself made you believe that you could create a game?
Because it's possible.
Okay, but were you just I want to create a game?
Yeah.
Okay. So then there wasn't any resistance in yourself to question that you were capable. When the idea came up, you just believed that you could do it. And you moved forward learning ways and steps to do it.
I think there was, but not too much because I pursued doing it. Because I just liked it.
Because you liked it and you were passionate about it. I'm adding my own words to it. Because what happens is that sometimes when we have fear in our space because we believe we may not be capable of something, it stops us from, one, being curious of the unknown. I'm just, I want to say that both of you, the art and the computer science for you, you guys gave yourself permission to be creative. To learn outside of maybe what you believed you knew. You kind of pushed your boundaries. And when you're having fun doing it, right? When you're having fun doing it, then it's not work the same way. And sometimes we have to give ourselves permission when we're studying to have fun along the way. My personality, I have more of a light personality, and I like to talk a lot of SHIT, right? So if I'm studying with you, I'm probably talking a little bit of shit. But it's okay, because at least we have fun with it. Of course you have to focus and lock in when you need to, but folks that are just always serious, sometimes they're hard for me to be around. I'm like, damn, you always serious. Shoot, lighten up a little bit. But it also just makes going through the process funner because you don't have to sit there and say, this is just gonna be hard or this is just gonna be challenging and I just gotta put my head down and hold my nose and, and just plow through it versus, we could take a break and go do such and such or, we could come back and do this later. And then the second thing I'll key in on is this idea of resistance. So, is anybody taking physics 4B yet? Anybody know what a resistor is? You know what a resistor is? Talk to me. Evan.
I don't really remember much, but it has something to do with electrical, I think it stops electricity from flowing at a certain pace.
Okay.
Overflow.
So if this represents a resistor, when current is flowing through this, just like as Adam is saying, say it's flowing through it at whatever rate, this slows that down. Now, not to a complete stop, but that resistor, if things are moving too fast, if the current's moving too fast along that circuit board, that resistor says, ooh, and it slows it down. Now, sometimes we have opportunities to grow and expand, but if we don't believe that we can control it because we have fear, we're like, hold on, slow that down. No, not too quick. Sometimes when we have that new opportunity, the resistor is the questions in your mind that pop up saying, well, you're not smart enough to do that. What makes you think you could do that? And you're like, oh, hold on, I need to go back and super analyze this because I'm listening to these negative thoughts that are stopping the flow of opportunity to come to me. So that is one way that we can sometimes sabotage ourselves. Talk to me, y'all. What y'all thinking? Okay. Yeah. And I'm not even going to sit here in front like I haven't done those things in life. Right? Sometimes we feel like we have to do something to be who we really are. Like, when I do these 5 things, then I'm going to be ready for this opportunity. But sometimes you just have to be, right? You just have to know that whatever is stored inside of me is enough, and it's gonna. And my job is to bring it out. But that's sometimes hard when we we're trained to use our left brain. Right? Our society trains us to use our left brain as our way of, this is the most valuable way to think. Right? You must use that processor that looks at things logically, that looks at things methodically, that looks at things systematically. You must have those things in place for then you to trust yourself. Versus your right brain, which is that comes from that place of intuition. And I would also add, that comes from that place of knowingness. And a lot of discoveries come from that right brain part, that intuitive part. But it takes a whole lot more trust and faith in ourselves to use that part to solve complicated problems. But the thing about it, especially in science, is that if I'm using my right brain to come up with a model of what I think things could be, in the universe or in the life sciences, I still have to do experiments to prove it. I'm just tapping into that side because I want new ideas. I want new possibilities. But there's a lot of things that we cannot solve through using logic with where we're at with science right now. What does Einstein say? He has a quote where he says, you can't solve a problem you can't find a solution at the same level as the problem. It has to be at a higher level to find that solution. I'm probably messing up that quote, but I'm paraphrasing it. So, something to think about. All right, so once we kind of get to a place where we feel like we starting to gain confidence in ourselves, we also have to think, how do we make sure that we stay there, right? Because sometimes we regress. But we want to make sure we do the little things that keep us sharp, that keep our confidence intact, so we can always have a strong mental attitude as we're going into these exams and as we're going to these interviews or going into, whatever we're pursuing in life. So are there any things that you would suggest that we can do so when we have confidence in ourselves, we can maintain that? And I'm going to call on somebody. So in this group right now of folks that are a little bit more shyer, you can't run and hide because there's nowhere to go. It's just us. And maybe you may get bailed out by people in virtual land. They may not bail you
Annalise's
out.
already got her answer.
All right, well.
So Annalise said she's learned that she needs to allow herself to prepare for opportunities. When there is an opportunity, then she can go into it with confidence, and when she shows up, it's a chance to reveal myself to be my best rather than exposing my flaws.
Okay. Be prepared for opportunities, okay? What else? I'll just state that one of the things that I try to do is that if I believe that I know something, like I always feel like as a student of science, I'm always winning when I can connect new information that I'm learning to existing information and it makes sense. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm taking thermodynamics in this physics course and it makes sense of what I believe that I learned in this chemistry 101B course. Right? Anytime I'm making those connections like that with new information to existing information, I'm winning. But anytime I have new information that I'm connecting to existing information and it don't make no sense, then I need to go back and figure out why. I'm not going to just let it go. I need to go back and figure out why, because anytime I have bad thinking, I need to find the error of that thinking and correct it with good thinking. So I'm just saying, it should bother you when you're learning something and there's bits and pieces of it that don't make sense. Let me give you guys an example. There was a MESA student before that was really good at math and physics, but he wanted to study molecular cell biology, and he had to take organic chemistry as one of those precursor courses to then transfer to a UC. Now, I'll even say that this person got into a UC and he failed that organic chemistry course before he transferred. So the school put him on hold and said, we'll still let you transfer the next semester if you then pass this course. So you can imagine he had way more pressure on him now to pass that course than he did the first time. But he kept saying, Dr. Moore, like with organic chemistry, I understand 80% of the concepts. So if I understand 80% of the concepts, I should be able to get at least an 80% on this exam. And I was like, no, organic chemistry don't work that way, bro. I said, organic chemistry is understanding how do you synthesize carbon-based molecules? How do you find the right environment? that these molecules would want to come together in a very specific way. I said, understanding 80% of that is not going to build that molecule. You have to understand it all. Maybe that worked for you in physics, and maybe that worked for you in that math course. That's not going to work for you in this organic chemistry course. And so guess what? Did he listen to my advice? No. He doubled down because of fear on what he had been doing before. And it didn't work like it didn't work the first time.
So he didn't get into.
Oh no, yeah, he lost that. That didn't happen. Now, to make a long story short, he ended up getting into that UC 7 years later. Because he took time off of school, worked, and then, and he didn't get in that major. He kind of stuck with the more, computer science programming side of the game. But no, he doubled down because of that fear. That fear was like, no, this has worked for me before, and this is what I know to do move forward. And he wouldn't change. And he had resistance to change. Go ahead.
So Stas says he looks a few steps forward, and Kiki said aiming for the moon, and so you'll at least get the star. I'm not really sure what that one. She asked, is it kind of like that idea?
Okay. Well, I like the idea of aiming for the moon. I mean, when we think about having a vision for what we want to do in the future, like dream big. Like dreaming is free. Like why would you dream small and contain yourself to something small versus saying this is what's possible? And maybe I don't know how to get there, but I'm at least starting with what I believe I really want. Now I'm not settling for what I think that I can get. So yes, aim for the moon. And so going into a class, you can't go into a class saying, I hope I get a B in this class. Because if you come into a class in my mind saying, I hope I get a B, you're probably going to get a C. I'm aiming to get 80%, right? That's what homeboy was trying to do with the organic chemistry class. I only need to understand 80% of the concepts. So if I'm going into a class, I'm aiming for an A. I want to know everything. And maybe I get a B. But it's not like I'm going into the class hoping to get a B. So again, sometimes we try to regulate our attitude about what we believe is possible so we don't get our feelings hurt. Right? We resist what's possible. Because I see it all the time, and I'm not saying I've never done this before as well too, but I've seen, students where, I'm talking to them, I'm like, did you give this class, this last exam, 110%? They're like, oh yeah, I keep it 110%. I'm like, well, all right, well, what did you do? What steps did you take? I'm like, you gave it everything? And they're like, well, I didn't give it everything. I'm like, well, why are you trying to trick yourself into thinking you gave more than you really did? But sometimes, from a psychology standpoint, when we do something and we give it everything and we're not successful, that hurts a whole lot more than when we said we gave it everything, but we had a little bit back, and we were like, well, I could have put a little bit more in it. But when you give it everything and you're not successful, you're like, damn. So what do you do then? You self-sabotage yourself by playing these little psychological games instead of giving it everything? In my mind, if I'm doing something, I'm giving it everything. And if I'm not successful, I'm going to go back, I'm going to think about it again, I'm going to change some stuff up, and then I'm going to go hard again. If I'm not successful, I'm going to go back and rejigger that mug again and go hard again. And then at that point, I may say, if I'm not successful, is this for me? But I'm not going to just give 70% and be like, oh damn, I got to stay in this course and I gave it 70% just to try to save my ego, or, not getting my feelings hurt. Think about it, y'all. I mean, it happens a lot more than people think. But we have to be fearless. As students of science, we have to be fearless. And I'm going to give you guys a real example. So I'm in grad school, right? My second year, their second year of grad school, I'm rotating in 3 different labs. My first year of grad school, I'm rotating in 3 different labs. And there was a guy in my second lab that I was rotating in. He was like, Fred, when you do science, you have to be fearless. Like you have to be able to, because sometimes you can do experiments where that experiment doesn't give you a direct path to the answer that you want. So people try to find easier ways to do experiments, but they don't give you the direct path to the answer you want. So he's like, you gotta be fearless. You gotta be able to find the experiments that give you the direct answer that you want, and then chip away at it until you actually are able to be successful and get it to work. And I'm talking smack to him. I'm like, man, I'll look experiment in the eye and be like, well, I got this, right? I'm over here talking smack to him. He's like, listen, Fred, I'm telling you about this. And I was like, yeah, that ain't me. That's the other people around here, but that's not me, right? Anyway, I'm in my 3rd year of grad school. I had made some discoveries my first few years. I had a chance to discover 5 genes. I had a chance to actually name these genes, and one of them was a really cool gene that was going to be a groundbreaking, discovery in regards to what it does in infertility in humans, right? So there was an experiment that I did that basically took me a year to get it to work. But I got that mug to work. I'm like, okay, I'm off to the races, right? Then there was another experiment that was similar to that one, technically a little bit harder, and it took me 6 months to get that to work, but I got it to work. So I'm like, we're gonna submit our research to Nature. Anybody who does science, Nature, Cell. Those are the top 3 journals in the world. People who submit their stuff to Science, Nature, and Cell, 80% to 90% of them don't even get past the editor to get shipped out to experts in the field. They're like, no. But we submit our stuff, it gets past the editor. I'm like, that's what's up. I'm about to get this Nature paper. You know what I'm saying? This stuff is there. I'm like, yeah, right? It goes out for review for 3 months, and then people came back and said, we want you to technically do a more complicated experiment than the first 2 that I did for you to get into this journal. And we were like, no one does that experiment, right? We've already done 2 to show that what we're saying is true or not. So what did we do? We had 15 references stating why we didn't have to do that experiment. We did everything else that they asked for, and then what they said? They said no. I was like, y'all said no. There's no more redos, right? They said no. So then we go to another journal, it's top tier, Proceeding in National Academy of Sciences, but it ain't Nature. It goes out for 3 months for review, and someone asked for the same exact experiment. And I was like, why y'all messing with my emotions around here, right? Do I have a competitor that's trying to compete because he just wants this information he or she to come out? And I just remember, I just got mad. I'm like, you know what, I'm turning. And I just remember, I locked in a way, I can't even describe it to you, but my mind locked in for 2 weeks, and I got that experiment to work in 2 weeks. And guess what popped up into my mind afterwards? Nikita. Yes. If I wouldn't have feared that experiment and done that the first time, I would have had a Nature paper. And I was like, damn. So, yes, fear can immobilize us and stop us from getting to where we need to get to. But it was a lesson for me, right? I was being arrogant when I was talking to homeboy. I didn't think it applied to me. I didn't have enough self-awareness in that moment to realize that I shouldn't, because when we make decisions coming from a place of fear, they're typically not the best decisions. 9 times out of 10, they're not the best decisions. And I let that creep up in my space, and I got. Now, I eventually did get a Nature paper, but it wasn't a science Nature paper. It was more of a science education Nature paper that I wrote and some things I did for my business. But I still wanted that. I wanted that paper, and I got my feelings hurt because of fear. All right, anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions about anything I've said so far? No? All right. So this last question is just more about this idea of when is it a good time to evaluate your STEM mental attitude, right? Like, is it a good time to ask yourself after each concept, after each chapter, before each exam? When do you think is a good time, Ronan, to ask and get a sense of what your STEM mental attitude is?
What is a good time?
Mm-hmm.
Usually before, I feel like before an exam, a little before an exam is a good time
Okay.
to reassess kind of where you're at, how you feel.
All right, anybody else? What are you thinking?
Stas says.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Hmm?
After the lecture notes?
After
Lecture notes?
you review your lecture notes? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Stas says after tests. And Annalay says it's important to check the concepts before and before the tests. Check after concepts and before the test. I'm sorry. This is so low tech. I'm so sorry.
All right. So the work that we're doing right now, the conversations that we're having right now, you know, all of this is you working on your inward image of yourself, having a strong mindset, having a strong belief system in yourself, and also working on when it's the right time to self-reflect, right? To have an honest assessment of where you're at. And that's going to be something that each person has to do on their own. But what I would suggest is that whenever you go through and evaluate yourself to figure out where you believe you're at in regards to your knowledge or understanding or confidence in the course, that you just take a mental note of it and then let it play itself out and be like, was I right on or was I off some? And if I'm off some, then you need to go back and figure out how to tighten that up. Right? Because again, you're working on finding a check and balance system in your own mind so you can trust yourself and actually be accurate when you trust yourself because you really, 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 really know it. Because false trust, it's not gonna get you to the finish line as a student of science. You actually have to develop real skills. You have to understand knowledge and know how to apply it in a very accurate way. Or no one's gonna hire you or want you working for them or building a bridge for them. I don't want you building a bridge for me if you're not confident and you don't know if this mud's gonna stand the test of time. Right? Like, I'm not gonna mess with you. I'm gonna mess with the other person, the woman over there that's saying, I got this. It's good. All right, so with that, there are some questions, you know, that you can think about in regards to, you know, it's a group project, but then, you know, we're not doing this as a class. So really this workshop, if I can summarize really quickly, this workshop really is just about how do you find ways to access your belief in yourself. And how do you try to find ways to wherever you are along that cycle right? Of the monarch butterfly, how do you always find ways to push yourself to get to the adult stage? And then once you're there, how do you find ways not to regress back and be able to stay at the adult stage? And if you have the ability to do that with your academics, then that will overlay with your confidence in anything that you do in life. Any new adventure, any new whatever you're learning. And I think that for your generation, it's critical for you guys to be able to always take in new information, learn it, because things are going to be adapting so quickly before you, like no other generation beforehand. Because again, no one can sit here and tell you what jobs are going to look like 10 years from now. If they do, they're lying to you. And no one is going to know what that's going to look like 20 years from now. But the jobs that are in 10 years from now, 15 or 20 years from now, they probably even haven't been created yet. And so you're going to have to always learn how to learn, right? How to convince yourself you actually understand these concepts, whatever it is, and that you can apply it in a way to add value to whatever you're looking at. All right, any last minute thoughts or questions before we close out? All right, you guys are free. Thank you guys for coming.